Aaron and I crossed paths when we were both in our 20s, two ambitious souls trying to find our place in the world. He had a quiet charm, a man whose presence commanded attention without uttering many words. His calm and composed nature stood in stark contrast to my often chaotic energy, and yet somehow we complemented each other perfectly, or so it seemed. Our relationship blossomed rapidly, much like an intense summer storm, passionate, overwhelming, and all-consuming. Aaron was the type of partner who gave wholeheartedly. No matter how small the gesture, he would slip notes into my bag, surprise me with coffee on long workdays, and always listen without judgment when I vented about my struggles. He was my anchor, the person who always seemed to know the right words when the weight of the world bore down on me. 3 years into our relationship, we got married. The ceremony was modest but beautiful, held in the same church where Aaron's parents had exchanged vows years before. I can still picture myself walking down the aisle, seeing Aaron's face light up with a smile that felt as if it could carry us through any challenge. At that moment, I was certain of one thing: I believed in forever. The first few years of marriage were a dream. We built a life together filled with weekend getaways, lazy Sunday mornings, and quiet evenings spent cooking dinner with music playing softly in the background. Aaron was everything I'd ever wanted in a partner: loving, supportive, and steady. But life has a way of testing even the most solid relationships. As time passed, small cracks began to appear, barely noticeable at first, but gradually, they grew. We both worked demanding jobs, and the stress of balancing our careers with our personal lives started to take its toll. Aaron, in particular, threw himself into his work, often staying late at the office in pursuit of a promotion he had been working toward for years. I supported him, of course, but I couldn't help but feel the space between us widening. Meanwhile, I was struggling in ways I couldn't fully articulate at the time. My role as a marketing manager at a fast-paced company drained me. Despite my deep love for Aaron, I began to feel invisible. He was always so calm and composed that I began to doubt whether he saw the emotional chaos I was experiencing. I told myself it was my responsibility to figure out how to feel whole again, but deep down, I resented the growing emotional distance between us. And then there was Jonathan. He was my boss at work, confident and charismatic, someone who seemed to command attention wherever he went. He had a way of making people feel seen, as if their words mattered more than anything else. At first, our interactions were casual, friendly conversations over coffee breaks or quick chats after meetings. But slowly, those moments began to feel different. His compliments lingered longer than they should have, and his attention felt like a lifeline at a time when I was struggling with my own insecurities. I didn't set out to betray Aaron. I loved him, or at least I thought I did. But the more time I spent with Jonathan, the more I found myself craving the validation he so effortlessly gave. He made me feel special, like someone worth noticing. It was intoxicating. What began as harmless texts, jokes, and encouragement during stressful projects soon evolved into something much more. I convinced myself it was nothing, that I was just overthinking innocent interactions, but deep down, I knew I was walking a dangerous path, one that could unravel everything Aaron and I had built. The first time Jonathan and I crossed the line was after an office celebration for landing a major client. The team had gone out for drinks, and by the end of the night, it was just the two of us left at the bar. He walked me to my car, his presence both comforting and exhilarating. When he leaned in, I didn't pull away. I wish I could say it was a moment of weakness, but part of me wanted it to happen. One moment turned into two, and before I knew it, I was living a double life. By day, I was Aaron's wife, the supportive partner trying to keep our home intact despite the cracks forming beneath the surface. By night, I was someone else entirely, lost in the thrill of something forbidden with Jonathan. I told myself it wasn't serious, that it didn't mean anything, but the guilt gnawed at me in ways I couldn't ignore. Aaron began to notice the changes in me. He'd ask if everything was okay, his concern evident in the way he observed me during quiet moments at home. I would always smile, reassure him, and brush off his worries. "I'm just tired," I'd say, or "Work's been crazy lately." He believed me because he wanted to. That's the kind of man he was. Trusting, patient, and deeply in love with me. But love can only blind someone for so long. As days turned into weeks and weeks into months, the tension of my double life became unbearable. Every stolen glance with Jonathan, every secret message exchanged, added weight to the burden I carried. I convinced myself I could handle it, that I could keep everything from falling apart. But deep down, I knew the truth. I was walking a tightrope, and it was only a matter of time before everything came crashing down. Aaron, ever perceptive, began to sense that something was wrong. He noticed the distance in my gaze during dinners, the way I flinched when my phone buzzed with a message, the excuses I made to stay late at work. His questions started small, cautious. "Is everything okay? Has work been getting to you?" I reassured him with a forced smile, telling him I was fine, even though I could see the doubt in his eyes. He didn't press me, not at first. But as time went on and my secrecy became harder to hide, his patience began to wane. One evening, Aaron came home early from work. I didn't expect him. He had texted earlier saying he'd be late due to a client dinner. I was in the living room, texting Jonathan, when I heard the front door creak open. The sight of Aaron standing there, holding a takeout bag in one hand and his briefcase in the other, made my stomach drop. "Hey," he said, his voice steady but carrying an undercurrent of suspicion. "I thought I'd surprise you with your favorite Thai food." My phone slipped from my hand, landing screen up on the couch beside me. For a brief moment, I froze. I had forgotten to lock the screen, and the notification banner with Jonathan's name and his last message. "I can't stop thinking about you" was glaringly visible. Aaron's eyes flicked to the phone. He didn't say anything at first, but the look on his face shattered whatever fragile illusion I had been holding on to. The warmth that had always been there in his gaze vanished in an instant. "Who's Jonathan?" he asked quietly, his voice calm in a way that terrified me more than if he had yelled. I stumbled over my words, desperately trying to come up with an excuse. Any excuse, to defuse the situation, but it was too late. He had seen enough. "Clara," he said, setting the takeout bag on the table with deliberate motion. "I need you to tell me the truth." And so I did. The words tumbled out of me, raw and jagged. I confessed everything. The late nights, the messages, the moments I'd shared with Jonathan. I told him how I'd felt invisible, how I craved validation in ways I didn't fully understand. I begged for his forgiveness, tears streaming down my face as I clutched his hands, desperately trying to hold on to the man I had betrayed. But Aaron didn't yell. He didn't rage. He just stood there, staring at me with an expression of profound hurt and disbelief. When I reached for him, he pulled away as though my touch burned him. "I don't even know who you are anymore," he said, his voice breaking. The next day, Aaron left. He didn't argue, didn't raise his voice. Instead, he wrote a note and left it on the kitchen counter, brief and cold. "I need time to think. Please don't contact me." The silence he left in his wake was suffocating. For the first time, I felt the full weight of my actions. I hadn't just betrayed him. I had shattered the trust we had carefully built over years. The weeks that followed blurred into a haze of loneliness. Aaron distanced himself, communicating only through his lawyer. Then, on a dreary Tuesday morning, I received the divorce papers. The sound of rain hitting the window was the only noise I could hear as I stared at the envelope, trying to muster the courage to open it. When I finally did, I found the documents that would dissolve everything we had. There was a short note from Aaron. "I don't want to fight. Just sign the papers. I only want the house and the car." I signed without hesitation, tears blurring the ink as I did. I knew I had no right to argue or contest anything. Not after what I had done. Aaron deserved peace, even if it meant my own misery. The last time I saw him was when he came to collect his things. He knocked instead of using his key. A small but sharp detail that stung more than I could have anticipated. I opened the door, and he entered without a word, his face impassive but distant. I watched him pack up his belongings, his clothes, books, the framed photos of us that used to hang on the walls. Each item he took felt like a piece of my heart was being torn away. I wanted to beg him to stay, to say something, Anything, but the words stuck in my throat. When he was done, he stood by the door, his hand resting on the handle as if about to say something. But he didn't. He just looked at me, his expression full of finality. "I hope you find what you're looking for," he said softly before turning and walking away. The door clicked shut behind him, and that was the end. A month later, the divorce was finalized. We never spoke again. He moved on with his life, leaving everything we had built in the past. I heard through mutual friends that he had relocated to a new city, found a new job, and was thriving. Part of me was relieved he was happy again, but another part of me, the part that still loved him, ached at the thought of him building a life without me. For me, therapy became my refuge, a place where I could start to face the consequences of my actions. It wasn't just the affair that I had to come to terms with. It was the loneliness, the insecurities, and the desperate need for validation that had led me astray. I had destroyed the most meaningful part of my life, and no amount of reflection could undo the damage. The guilt followed me every day, but the real pain was realizing just how much Aaron had loved me. How patient, kind, and supportive he had been. He had been everything I needed, and I had betrayed him for fleeting moments of attention that meant nothing in the long run. 5 years later, I received an invitation to a wedding. It was from Emily, one of Aaron's closest friends, and it struck me like a punch to the gut. The wedding was at the same church where Aaron and I had exchanged vows. I considered tearing the invitation up, but something in me, perhaps the need for closure, compelled me to go. I hadn't given Aaron the real apology he deserved. Maybe this was my chance. The church was almost exactly as I remembered it. The same stained glass windows, the soft glow of candles, and the lingering scent of roses. Every corner seemed to echo with memories of us. I scanned the crowd, hoping and dreading to see Aaron. And then there he was. He looked even more refined than I remembered, confident in his dark suit. His hair now flecked with gray. He was speaking to a woman with bright red hair, her laughter lighting up the room as her hand brushed against his arm. A pang of jealousy twisted in my chest. Was she the one who had replaced me? Did she make him happy in ways I never could? I tried to stay unnoticed, slipping into a pew, but my movement caught his attention. For a brief moment, time seemed to freeze. Our eyes met, and the woman beside him, graceful and composed, stood as a sharp contrast to everything I felt in that moment. Aaron's face was unreadable. There was no anger, no warmth, just quiet recognition. I lowered my head, focusing on the ceremony, struggling to keep my emotions at bay. When the vows were exchanged and the reception began, I lingered near the exit, debating whether to leave before the emotions became too much. But then I heard it. "Clara." His voice was soft but unmistakable. I turned, and there he was, standing just a few steps away. He looked every bit the man I had once loved, but there was something different about him now. Calm, assured, and infinitely more composed than the man I had left behind. "Hi, Aaron," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He nodded slightly, his gaze steady but distant, almost as if we were strangers rather than two people who once shared everything. "Are you well?" he asked, his tone measured. "Therapy helps," I replied, swallowing hard. "I'm trying to make sense of everything." He nodded again. "I'm relieved," he said. "That's good." "I'm so sorry," I whispered, tears welling in my eyes. "I don't expect you to forgive me, but I needed you to know how deeply sorry I am for what I did. I ruined the best thing I ever had. I was selfish." Aaron took a long look at me, his face softening just a little. "I don't know if I'll ever forgive you, Clara," he said finally, his voice quiet but firm. "But I've made peace with it. I had to. Took a lot of time. I won't lie and say it didn't hurt like hell, but it's in the past now. I've moved on." His gaze drifted to the woman with red hair, who was now chatting with someone near the dance floor. "I found peace," he added. A surge of jealousy hit me, but I suppressed it. I had no right to feel that way anymore. "I never stopped loving you," I whispered, tears falling freely now. "But I know I wasn't the person you deserved." Aaron's eyes softened again, just for a moment. but the expression quickly faded, replaced by something colder. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Clara," he said, his voice steady. "You deserve that, but it won't be with me." I nodded, the tears streaming down my face. I had lost him, and no amount of regret could ever make that right.